town, and they're going to bring someone along with them that Badger fans are very familiar with. A familiar foe comes to Madison this weekend. We're going to talk about it, talk about recruiting, talk about what needs to happen this weekend. All that and more in today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what is going on, everyone? I'm Ryan Herrings, your host of Locked On Badgers. Thank you so much for tuning in, for joining the show. Really do appreciate it. As always, we're here for your team every single day, and we're glad to do it. Appreciate the community, appreciate everybody tuning in, and let's get into it. So, week 3 college football. I think we're still just judging the pulse of Badger fans, watching Badger Twitter, seeing Badger message boards. I think we're all here together that we're a little deflated. I think we're still like a little down from Washington State because nobody expected us to be 1-1 at this point. Nobody did. Not the most pessimistic fan. This was 3 layups, and then we would prove ourselves or not against Ohio State, right? So how do you react as a fan base, when you drop a game you just shouldn't have dropped? And I think we're all there. We're kind of processing it together. But time waits for nobody, right? Week 3 coming up, and it's an important one. It's a really important get-right game. I will say this. I am very glad that we don't have Ohio State right on the heels of Washington State. We have an opportunity for a get-right game, and let's talk about it. New Mexico State coming to Madison, 3:30, Camp Randall. And as I mentioned in the opener, they're bringing a familiar name. Jerry Kill, the former Minnesota Gophers coach, is the coach of New Mexico State. So certainly a guy that Badger fans are familiar with, a person who knows his way around Madison and the Big Ten country. And quite frankly, even though he was a Gopher, a guy that a lot of people spoke really well of, Jerry Kill has a lot of respect in the industry as a guy who tries to do it the right way, cultivates relationships. So obviously he had issues with seizures while he was the coach of Minnesota, if you remember that or don't. That's why he kind of had to leave that position. And now he is the head man with the Aggies, New Mexico State. And let's talk about New Mexico State a little bit, do kind of a brief talk here. They're really bad, everybody. Like, Washington State isn't a great Power 5 team. They're a mid-tier Pac-12 team, and nothing I saw last Saturday changed my mind. I don't think they're a really good team that we lost to last weekend. But New Mexico State is really bad. Like, Washington State is a much better team. So, New Mexico State's coming in. Wisconsin is a 37-point favorite. If that gives you any kind of an idea of what type of game this is likely going to be. They have 2 quarterbacks that they played quite a bit. It's Pavia and Gavin Frakes and Diego Pavia. Pavia is a junior. He's the better runner. Frakes is a freshman. He's more of a 6'4" pocket passer. They are atrociously bad throwing the ball this season. Like, terrible. 42% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions. They don't do that much better on the ground. They're averaging 3.6 yards per carry, and that's with some chunk plays in like more of a gadget way. Like, their running game is bad and their passing game is worse. Like, the offense is really bad. It's terrible. Minnesota absolutely mauled them. So New Mexico State, let's talk about who they've played, what they've done. They're 0-3 on the year. They have losses to UTEP and Nevada. Neither UTEP nor Nevada is very good. UTEP has 1 win. That is against New Mexico State. So they're 0-3 against the schedule. It's not very good. Their one lone test against a Big Ten-ish team was Minnesota. They got trunked 38-0 in a game where they barely had the ball. Minnesota had the ball 44 minutes in that game. Okay. New Mexico State barely did anything. And again, they are averaging 42% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions. They're not running the ball well, shifting between 2 quarterbacks. Jerry Kill was asked about which quarterback's going to play this weekend. He said it's really up in the air, a day-to-day thing. It's just clear they don't have one. That's the problem, right? They're not choosing between good options here. They're choosing between 2 bad options. Defensively, their front seven's pretty experienced. They play kind of a 4-2-5 at times is where they came into the year. So they shifted up their defensive linemen a little bit to get a little quicker. They have some transfers in the secondary. And again, the front 7 is probably the strength of their team. They returned 7 or 8 guys from last year's squad, a bunch of dudes with experience. They're pretty good tacklers, but there's just not much there. There's no depth in the program. Minnesota ran for almost 300 yards against them. Mo Ibrahim averaged 6.3 yards per carry. And they're just a really bad team. There's no other way to slice it. It's a really bad team. Wisconsin is favored by 37. The issue here is what type of Wisconsin are we going to get? It does feel like in both Wisconsin's games so far this year, they've slept walked. They've come out with a lack of maybe urgency, intensity. Certainly the Illinois State game. Illinois State, listen, they were never winning that game, but Illinois State was on a drive to begin the game. It was 0-0. They're down at the goal line. You had that Torchio 100-yard interception return, but Wisconsin didn't start that game looking great. And then Washington State, kind of the same thing. That first quarter against Washington State wasn't really crisp either. So I think out of the gates in this one, it's going to be important to see what type of Wisconsin shows up. Is this, no matter what, Wisconsin's winning this game, right? Knock on wood. Like things can always happen in sports, but Wisconsin has a 99% chance essentially of winning this game just on sheer talent. They could basically hand off every single time and probably be just fine, but that's not really what we're looking for here. In the get-right game, the game coming off Washington State, and the game before Ohio State, they need to look a lot better. They need to look crisp. And that first couple drives, that first quarter, that first half of that first quarter, the energy in the stadium, the energy on the team is going to be really important to track, right? Because we don't really know the core of this team yet. We don't really know the character of this team yet, good or bad. Last year's team had a ton of veterans, a ton of guys like Colin Wilder, Jack Sanborn, Leo Chanel, veteran secondary player, Scott Nelson. There's a lot of real veteran dudes on that team, Jake Ferguson, that are gone. And we need to see what type of leadership steps up in its stead and how they start this game this week, because this is a game that'd be really easy for Wisconsin to go through the motions on, right? Ohio State's next weekend. They're coming off a disappointing loss. Are some of the goals inside that locker room gone? This is a team that's pretty terrible. Again, like, how they start is something I'm very interested in. And I think it's something that's very important to see, because it's gonna tell us a little bit about the character of this team. Because this season is far from over. Like, despite all the doomsday predictions, all the frustrations, and listen, I've been there with y'all with some of the frustrations. This season has a lot to play for. So if they come out and they sleepwalk, I think that it's going to be a harbinger for things to come. And conversely, if they come out and their hair's on fire and they're just, you can tell like they are ticked off about what happened last week. They're getting ready for what's coming up next week. I think we take a lot of optimism from that. So we're going to talk a little bit next segment. What do we need to see from this game, right? What is actually important for us as Badger fans, for the team coming out of this game? What are we excited to see? What are we hopeful to see? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. Stick around for that. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your online sports betting needs, information, sports news. It has you covered through the entire gambit of sports: UCF or UFC, golf, NASCAR. Not basically any type of sporting event, basketball, baseball, football, college, pro. It is on BetOnline. You can find the latest sports news, online Vegas casino games like roulette, blackjack, futures betting, live in-game betting. It is all there, no matter what your flavor. It is why we use it on Locked On. It's one of the industry standards for the latest lines, props, odds, and all your latest sports news. BetOnline is the number one source for that. Grab your mobile device, head to the website today, learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, Locked On Badgers, your first listen every day. I'm really excited to be here, really excited to talk about week 3 coming up. And this is a big one. I've talked about it. It's a big one for a lot of reasons. Let's see what type of character resiliency this team has. I don't want to see a team come out there and sleepwalk. Like, this is an important moment for this team to build some momentum. That get-right game going into Ohio State. My parents are going to this game, so shout out to them. I hope they enjoy it. So let's get excited about it, because there's some really important, tangible things that can come out of this. So what do we actually need to see here? I broke it down into 3 things: domination, clean game, and health. Let's start with domination, okay? And I'm not trying to belittle an opponent. I'm not trying to say New Mexico State has no chance, but they're not a good team. We need to see a dominant Wisconsin performance this weekend. What does that actually mean, right? What is a dominant performance? It's not winning 24-10 in a game that you never feel like you're going to lose, but you never really fully put the accelerator down. They have to bury New Mexico State, right? So what does that actually mean? What am I actually looking for when we say that? I think we need to see Miles Burkett, whoever that number 2 quarterback is, which is Miles Burkett right now, for at least a quarter. Like, that's part of what I'm talking about. If in a dominant effort, in a dominant performance, Graham Mertz isn't playing the whole game. Like, I don't want to see Graham Mertz past the 3rd quarter. right? I want Wisconsin to be up 35, 33, 34 nothing, 34-3 at that point, and we can get Miles Burkett some reps because low key that's going to be really important for this team going forward this year. There's chances are Mertz is going to get dinged up at some point. That's just life. That's football, right? I mean, he's been dinged up multiple times in his career. Jack Cohen has been dinged up. Like, it happens. And we need Burkett to build some reps, to take some handoffs, even if it's just out there taking the snap, seeing the defense, calling it in the huddle, looking offensive linemen in the eyes, handoff, no fumbles. Let's keep the offense moving, get the signals from the sidelines. Like, those are important reps to build a freshman quarterback, right? Like, we need that because there's a very real scenario where something happens to Mertz, he gets stepped on, tweaks something, and you might need Miles Burkett against Iowa, Northwestern, Michigan State, against teams that are tough and in hostile environments. So coming out of this game, we have to do well enough to put him in a position to get some reps, to build some continuity, to build some comfort. And so that's one of the first things when I'm saying dominate. Like, I want a dominating performance to the point where we get Burkett a quarter's worth of reps, right? Running game averages 6+ yards per carry. That's another one. Minnesota did this, by the way. Minnesota I think actually they're at like 5.8. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. But this is a game where let's see that running game with Braylon and Chez and Garendo. Please get Garendo some more reps, by the way. Let's see that running game average 6+ yards per carry. Again, the strength of New Mexico is probably their front seven on defense. It's still not a stout team, okay? Wisconsin should be able to get that running game going, rip off some chunk yardage, wear them down, get some big plays in the passing game. They should really be able to dissect New Mexico State and dictate the board, right? Like in chess, when you have more pieces, you can kind of dictate the board. You can kind of push your opponent into things. And this should just be a bully ball on all fronts game for Wisconsin. I want to see 6+ yards per carry. I want to see Miles Burkett in that fourth quarter. And I want to see, finally, if we're talking about domination, I want to see the offensive line assert their will. And I'm not saying they haven't in moments, but I want to see people on skates. I want to see clean pulling, right? Where we're getting to that second level, where we're getting the initial contact on the defensive line and then walling off the linebacker, where we're seeing pancakes on the edge, where we're seeing gigantic holes opening up and New Mexico State defenders starting to just break, right? The levee when there's too much water against it, the sandbags give way and things break apart. I think we need to see some of that this game to feel good about it's not just about Ohio State, but to feel good about the rest of the season, to build up some momentum where, this team, it feels like this team can make a run through the West, because I think they can. I am not writing this book off. Like, I don't see anybody in the West that scares me. Okay. Now, if I'm a Minnesota fan or an Iowa fan or a Northwestern fan, Purdue fan, I'm saying the same thing, by the way. Like, I'm not seeing a Wisconsin team that scares me either if I'm those guys. But Wisconsin on paper, I think, is still probably the most talented team here. Now, let's start to assert our will against lesser opponents, against lesser front seven. So I want to see that offensive line really get nasty, really coming off what was really a disappointing performance from the O-line against Washington State, where we had trouble running the ball. And there were a lot of penalties. Let's see that offensive line get a little angry, get some push, and really bury this front seven of New Mexico State. Sorry. So I want to see domination, and I want to see it in those ways. The last one is Mertz. Mertz has to keep the mo. Mertz, if we're saying, part of this is just continuing to build for the season, Mertz has had 2 good games in a row now. He's stacked 2. Let's stack another one. And that doesn't mean that he needs to carry the offense. He doesn't need to throw 35 times, but I want to see a balanced offense where Mertz is hitting on his throws, going through his reads and his progressions, taking care of the ball and taking the shots that are there. And I think we need to keep seeing that stack where if he has another good performance, suddenly you've put 3 good games together in a row going into Ohio State. You're feeling good. And so much of being a quarterback is feeling good. Have that swagger. So this game is so important, I think, in that area, just to dominate offensively, push them around. Another good game from Mertz, get the running game going, right? All of that is super important. The second big thing I want to see, domination. Second big thing is clean game, right? The other big thing that we can talk about coming out of this contest, the Badgers have to play a clean game, which they demonstratively, I mispronounced that word, which they clearly did not do against New Mexico State, right? 11 penalties, multiple turnovers, missed field goals. This game has to be clean. Like, let's clean up some of the silly penalties. And there's penalties every game, but some of the Badger penalties last weekend were silly, right? Like Hayden Rucci's block in the back. That was just a boneheaded play by a really good player. Like, I'm not trying to crush Ruch here, but they didn't need to do that. Like the hands to the face from Nelson, he got beat to the inside. He was trying to protect his quarterback, but you got to keep your hands down. Tippmann had a bad hold. Like this needs to be a cleaner game. Let's clean up some of the penalties. Because again, if you start to see this and you have another game with penalties with issues, when those things start to stack, it's more indicative of a trend. Right now, that Washington State game could just be a one-off. It could be a blip, an aberration, right? If you have another game that's not clean, full of penalties, full of miscues, full of turnovers, then you start to wonder if this team is either a little too young, a little too undisciplined. And that's the last thing you want going into Ohio State Columbus, right? The last thing we want is another game where we look sloppy, where we're trying to clean up simple things. We have to get past the simple things so we can start getting better at the tough things. And you can't do that if you have 11 penalties and multiple turnovers. So turnovers have to get cleaned up. Penalties have to get cleaned up. And really in this is special teams as well, right? We're talking clean game. Field punts. We've had a couple punt miscues. Be clean on kick coverage, right? We're going to see much, obviously, right? Captain Obvious here. We're going to see a different caliber of athlete against Ohio State. So let's clean up the kick coverage stuff now. Let's field punts cleanly. Let's hit field goals. I mean, I'm really hopeful we're able to get Vito Calvaruso, if he's still the kicker, like I think he's going to be, some easy looks in this game, right? Let's let him get into a little bit of a rhythm. Again, last week was bad. It was ugly, but it's one game. Like, let's let Vito get into a rhythm, hit some field goals. Let's clean up the kick coverage, right? Let's field punts cleanly. So that's the second big component this weekend, right? I said domination, and inside that is offensive line, Mertz, the running game, and then I said clean game, which inside that is penalties, turnover, special teams. And the last thing is just try to get out healthy, right? And there's only so much coaches and players can do with that. There's an element of lady luck in all sports, in all of life. We get that. But one of the ways you can make it easier on yourself, one of the ways you can safeguard yourself is beat the crap out of them through the first couple quarters, and then you can get your starters out of the game, right? I mean, it's that simple. It's not rocket science. Beat the crap out of them so Braylon Allen isn't taking carries in the fourth quarter. So Miles Burkett is in there. So Nick Herbig's not out there, right? So, these critical components to your team, the most important pieces of your jigsaw puzzle. So those guys aren't out there as much. And that's the best thing you can do to limit injuries, to get out of games healthy. That's the only thing you can do, right? Just beat the crap out of a team you should beat the crap out of. And, I fully understand, and I'm entirely cognizant of the fact that that's easier said than done. But if this is also the team we think it is, it should be done this weekend, right? Like, New Mexico State's really bad. Minnesota beat the crap out of them, right? They lost to Nevada and UTEP. This is not a game that should be competitive. And if it's not a game that's competitive, you are obviously able to get your starters out of there, to give them more rest, to lessen the risk of injury. So those are the three big things I'm looking for in this weekend, right? Domination, which again, starting with the lines, starting with Mertz, getting Miles Burkett in the game, clean up the mistakes, like limit the penalties, hold on to the ball, field punts cleanly, clean field goal game if you can do it. And then the last one is just knock on wood, get a little lucky, try not to get too banged up before the Ohio State game, before the meat of the schedule. And there's some of that you can control as coaches and players, right? You get up 35-0 in the third quarter, you can take those dudes out. You can give your younger guys reps. You can develop Miles Burkett. You can see Julius Davis. You can get some more reps for your second string offensive line, get Joe Brunner out there. So those are the three big things I think coming out of this game, because this isn't the type of game you go into and you talk about the keys to victory and how could New Mexico State beat us. Like, if New Mexico State beats us, the season's over. Like, so that's not the talking point here. The talking point is, how does this team get better? How does it rebound from last week? And how does it get ready for Ohio State and the meat grinder that's coming up? So that's where I'm at with New Mexico State, everybody. Really appreciate everybody listening. After the break, we're going to talk a little recruiting. A bunch of really interesting visitors on campus last week against Washington State. I'm going to highlight some of the players that I find most interesting, most intriguing, what's going on with quarterback recruiting still, where are we at there? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. I want to thank everybody for listening, watching, however you're finding us, Locked On Badgers. I really do appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. It's humbling, this community we're building, and let's just keep it going. Let's keep talking Badgers. We're going to keep getting really smart guests on, and we're just going to keep the content flowing. That's 100% the goal. So let's talk recruiting visitors, Washington State. And we're going to have a more comprehensive show, I think, next week. But I wanted to highlight some players that I think are really interesting here that I didn't get a chance to talk about. So we did an interview with Cole LaCrue, the quarterback recruit coming out of Colorado. He was on campus. We talked to him. So we're not going to talk a bunch about Cole this episode, but I did want to follow up with that interview and just say I was so impressed with him. Both him and Ryan Brown, by the way, the two quarterbacks that we've talked to on the show, really impressive kids. Can go, just line by line on plays, what they're looking for. Both have a ton of swagger, believe. I like them both. And I don't think either's a reach. I would offer them both. But let's talk a few other players. So Ryan Montgomery, this is a big one. So he's a 2025 kid, quarterback coming out of Ohio, 4-star, one of the blue chip early quarterbacks in that 2025 class. Getting him on campus, he's going to be a tough pull. He's a national level recruit, but so is Mertz. It's not impossible, and you can't do it unless you get him on campus, unless you establish those relationships early. So, he is an Ohio kid. I know Ohio State has interest, 4-star player. Those type of pulls are tough, but you can never get those pulls unless you get in early. So, kudos to the Badgers coaching staff. It was great to see Ryan Montgomery on campus. He's really good, so file it away in the back of your heads. That one's a 2025 kid. It's a ways off. Sticking with quarterback recruiting, Aubry Medtower, 6'6", 220-pound quarterback, 4-star out of Texas. He's a 2024 kid, a top 200 player. Again, pocket guy. He has a look and a feel kind of like a Trevor Lawrence when you look at his body frame, the way he moves in the pocket. He's not as athletic as Trevor Lawrence, don't get me wrong. But big arm, getting him on campus is a big deal as well. And again, a top 200 quarterback from the 2024 class. So somebody to file away in the back of your head. Kudos to this recruiting department, to Mickey Turner, to Bobby Ingram. They have gotten a lot of quarterbacks cycling through campus lately. The two we've talked to on the show, LaCrue, Brown, a couple in-state kids, Kaminsky and Chase Spellman, and then some of these national level players. We talked Ryan Montgomery, the 2025 blue chipper, and Medtower, the 2024 blue chipper. These are really intriguing big-time talents at the quarterback spot that they've been cycling through Madison. So definitely good to see. Nathan Roy is a 6'5", 270-pound offensive lineman coming out of Wisconsin, also in the 24 class. That 2024 in-state Wisconsin class is going to be really good, like really good. So this year, obviously, we have so it's really been interesting the last couple of years, right? Because last year's cycle was loaded. You had multiple 4-star players, a bunch of offensive linemen. Obviously, you lost Hinsman and Shrouth to Notre Dame and Ohio State, respectively, but you still brought in Joe Bruner. There was a ton of talent that you were still able to bring in off of that group. And then you had this year's class, which really was barren in terms of high-level prospects. You have, Nate White, the running back, coming in, but aside from that, it's not a lot there. And then next year's class, the 24 class, guys like Corey Smith, Donovan Harbor are both blue chip, high 4-star players. Nathan Roy, who we're talking about right now, that was on campus. He's already picked up offers from Penn State, Wisconsin, big offensive lineman, athletic. Next year's class is going to be completely loaded, and Wisconsin's going to have to bang it out of the park, but there's a lot of dudes. There's a lot of depth. We talked about Donovan Harbor. He was there for Washington State. He is a national level prospect, much like Corey Smith, his teammate, actually. He was there, 300-pound offensive lineman, 6'5", and he already has offers from, there's Penn State, there is Oregon, Florida. He's got interest from Ohio State, Notre Dame. Like, he is a national. He is that Billy Shrouth, Carson Hinsman, Joe Bruner. He is that level of prospect and that level of recruit. So Wisconsin's going to have to battle for him, but getting him on campus again is a big deal. Kudos to Mickey Turner, the recruiting department, Bob Bosted, getting those kids and those players on campus. A couple other players I just want to highlight. Eric Johnson, ARIC, Eric Johnson, a 24 athlete out of Illinois. Listed as receiver, but I think he could be a receiver or DB. I like his film a lot, and he's definitely somebody to, again, put in the back of your brain. He's a 24 kid. He's not a 4-star. He's a 3-star player, but 6'2", big frame, really athletic. I think he could play on either side of the ball. So Eric Johnson, somebody I really want to talk about. We're going to dig more into his film on a future show. Like him a lot. And then there was a couple of basketball prospects there. A couple of the committed basketball guys. So Gus Yalden, John Blackwell were there. So it was fun to see them on campus checking out their future home. They seem super excited about it. You know, the Gus bus has some awesome pictures up on social, interacting with fans, getting hyped. You know, I've said it a bunch on the basketball shows. Gus Yalden is going to be an icon in Madison. The Gus bus is going to be one of the favorite things that Badgers basketball, Badger sports fans have over the next 4 years. I'm so excited to see that. And that's the show, really. So we're going to dive much deeper into recruiting coming up next week. Tomorrow, I think we're coming at you with an offensive line breakdown. We're going to take a deep dive on the offensive line. So lots more content coming your way. But yeah, big game coming up this weekend. A big game in a get-right moment. Wisconsin has to really look the part of the dominant bully against the Aggies. And if they don't, I think we have things to worry about. So that's the show. Appreciate everyone listening. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Locked On Badgers, your team every day. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten. Nate Dickinson will take you around the conference, all the latest news and notes from the rivals we mostly hate and the ones we totally hate. That's on Locked On Big Ten. Go check that out. And with that, man, we'll talk to you tomorrow on Wisconsin. Let's go.